Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the blazing soul sun. Your sandals crunching through reddish dust as you walk a narrow path lined with baobab trees, goat herders, and a horizon that never seems to get closer. You're just a kid, now, born into the man people in the once mighty, now rising Mali Empire, and trust me, you have no clue that you're going to become the richest human who ever lived. No, really richer than Bezos, Musk, Scrooge McDuck in a gold vault, combined. But don't get ahead of yourself right now. Your biggest worry is whether you'll get a second helping of millet porridge. Tonight, you're barefoot, dodging donkey, dumb, listening to elders hum stories while Grias the oral historians recite your ancestors' deeds. Benia. Teach a mango tree. You don't know it yet, but those stories are already threading you into the greater weave of your empire. You're not royalty, not yet. You're just Musa, a curious, weary kid who likes to eavesdrop and sneak honey cakes from the kitchen fires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where the tribe is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Mali you grow up in is just emerging from the shadow of the once glorious Ghana Empire, not the modern country, but the ancient realm that controlled gold and salt roots centuries before you were born. Now, under the rule of King Abubakar II, the empire is pushing its borders, rich with gold, pepper, and yes, that weirdly valuable white crystal salt, the kind you lick from your fingers after a good dried meat snack. Your father is a miner, noble, or perhaps a wealthy commoner. Historians still argue whether you came from royal blood, or were just a lucky guy in the right caravan at the right time. Either way, someone notices you. Maybe it's the way you recite proverbs with precision, or the way you can haggle down a salt merchant without blinking, or maybe you just have that main character energy. Before long, you're sent off to learn statecraft, languages, religion. You study the Quran, learn to read Arabic and usual. For many in your time and quietly impress the older scholars, you tag along on trading missions. Picture this: hundreds of camels sneaking across the desert, each piled high with gold dust stored in tiny leather pouches, ivory tusks gleaming in the sun. Even slaves in tow, the tragic norm of empire economies. Then, you camp under starlit skies, hear drums in the distance, and smell the faint trace of roasted yams wafting from fireside pots. On one journey, a tour guide warns you about desert spirits that haunt lost caravans. You laugh. Nervously, you definitely keep closer to the fire than night. In these early years, you pick up more than just trade talk. You begin to grasp the delicate balance of power, faith, and wealth. You see elders make decisions based on omens, market shifts, or sheer gut feeling. You learn that sometimes strength isn't in the sword, it's in the silence between negotiations, or in knowing when not to speak. You meet scholars from Egypt, merchants from Morocco, even some odd-looking Europeans who smell vaguely of cheese and desperation. Through them, you hear whispers of other worlds, far-off cities like Cairo, Mecca, and Constantinople, places where palaces shimmer and armies march in gold-trimmed boots. You tuck those names into your mind like prized stones. At night, you lie beneath the canopy of stars, the Sahara wind howling like some ancient guardian spirit. You think about the stories Grias told of Sundiata Keita, founder of your empire, a boy who couldn't walk until he could. You wonder if greatness sneaks up on people like that, or if it builds slowly, like the slow drip of honey from a cracked pot. Here's a quirky one for you, to protect their skin from the brutal desert sun. Some travelers in your region dab their bodies with paste made from crocodile dung. Yep, it's disgusting. But hey, SPF 1000 wasn't around yet, and fashion hurts. You're still young when news arrives that shifts the air. King Abubakar II is preparing for something odd. He's grown obsessed with the idea that there are lands across the Atlantic, beyond the setting sun. Everyone laughs at first until they realize he's not joking. He builds ships, hundreds of them, stocks them with food, gold, men, and then one day, he sets sail, leaving you, Musa, as his second in command, his deputy. You're barely grown, still not expecting much. Maybe he'll be back, maybe not. Spoiler, he's not coming back. And just like that, your life flips. You're no longer the clever apprentice, the keen-eyed observer. You're wearing the weight of a crown you didn't reach for, not yet coronated. But the palace is whispering your name. The empire this vast, Sun-scorched patchwork of kingdoms and vassals is about to land in your lap. What do you do with it? You breathe. You watch the rivers. You summon your advisors. And you wait. Because ruling an empire doesn't begin with gold. It begins with quiet. You don't hear a trumpet fanfare. No one tosses rose petals when the crown comes for you. It just arrives. The news slips in like desert mist. Abubakari's fleet has vanished. No wreckage. No messengers. No trail of smoke on the Atlantic. Horizon. Just gone. Now. You're in charge. You Musa, the second in command. The quiet observer with a sharp memory and a sharper sense of timing. Your empire, Mali, stretches across West Africa like a sleeping lion, from the salt mines of Tagaza to the lush fields along the Niger River, and it's all yours to manage. No pressure. You're officially crowned the Mansa, a title that means more than king. It means emperor, guardian, spiritual father of the people. You don't just rule Mali, you embody it, and as a bonus, your new job comes with a frankly unreasonable amount of gold. Golden bars, golden dust, golden earrings, and saddle trimmings. Sometimes you probably trip over a gold pot just trying to find breakfast. Still, the crown weighs heavier than it shines. Your advisors are nervous. Your enemies are watching. Some even doubt your right to rule. Historians still argue whether your claim was legal or just super convenient. But honestly, the guy before you just launched himself off the planet, so it's not like you cut in line. The palace at Niani becomes your headquarters. It isn't some towering European-style castle. It's more earth-toned and graceful. Built from mud brick and palm wood, humming with courtiers, cooks, camels, and petitions. Everyone wants your attention. Everyone needs a judgment. And you need a nap, but no rest for the golden. Your first moves matter. You start by stabilizing trade routes, those veins of your empire pulsing with salt, slaves, cola nuts, ivory, and, of course, gold. You establish tax systems, tighten military controls, and subtly remind rebellious provinces that, yes, your army includes guys on horseback with spears longer than your average canoe. Your empire's backbone isn't just soldiers, though it's people. You rely on Qadis Islamic judges, advisors, and local rulers called Farbas to help govern Mali's massive territory. You're also very careful about religion. Islam is your official faith. But your people are a rich mix of beliefs, animists, ancestor worshippers, and other pre-Islamic traditions that go way back. You don't crush those practices, you incorporate them, you keep things smooth. You're basically a human bridge between worlds. One foot in the mosque, the other in the forest shrine. Here's where things get spicy. You start hearing rumors, whispers, that people far beyond Africa have started to notice Mali. Arab traders talk about your golden empire like it's El Dorado in Europe, where folks are still figuring out what soap is. Cartographers begin sketching out a vague, mysterious land of gold in West Africa. They don't know your name yet, but they will. Remember that story your griot told you as a kid about the lion who waited in silence before pouncing? That's you now. You're patient. You're calculating. You don't make wild declarations. Instead, you begin to plan something big, something that will put your empire's name on the world map. But that's still a few years off. In the meantime, you tend to your empire like a vast garden. You water it with trade deals, prune it with discipline, and shade it with diplomacy. You even send out envoys to Cairo and other North African capitals, bearing gifts and letters written in the most formal Arabic you can afford. Also, side note, your gold reserves are so vast that some scholars believe your empire controlled nearly half of the world's gold supply at the time. That's not a flex, it's a power move. Imagine walking into a medieval party and someone says, "Oh yeah, this guy, he owns the moon and like 3 smaller planets, but not everything is smooth." One of your early headaches is managing those pesky Berber raiders up north. They keep poking your borders, hoping to snag some quick loot or destabilize key salt mines. You respond with classic Musa diplomacy. You send negotiators first, soldiers second, and spies third. You're not just playing chess. You're playing dessert level for D chess with camel-shaped pieces. And speaking of fringe tales, there's this odd little legend about a talking bird kept at your court. Some say it was a gift from a wandering mystic. Others claim it could recite prayers in Arabic. Total nonsense, probably. But it's the kind of thing griots love to slip into songs. And who are you to stop a good bedtime myth? You also start dabbling in architecture. Though your empire hasn't fully embraced grand buildings yet, you fund repairs to mosques and introduce more North African styles. Nothing too dramatic, not yet. But you're setting the stage for something grander. Each season, your rule grows more confident. The traders return with stories of safe roads and fair prices. The scholars arrive in greater numbers, and the people, they start saying your name with a kind of reverent hush. Musa, Mansa Musa. Still, at night, you wonder about a Bubakari, about the ocean, about whether power is a thing you wear, or a thing that wears you. You wonder whether it's possible to rule so vast a land without breaking something in the process. But each morning, the city of Niani wakes beneath the rising sun, and your name is the first word on everyone's lips. You eat your honey cakes. You wrap your robes. You meet with your council, and somewhere, far off, another caravan rumbles toward you, bringing goods, stories, and a few more whispers of destiny. You wake early, as usual. The mornings in Niani are cool before the sun climbs up and starts baking the red earth, like an overzealous baker with no chill. But today's different. You're thinking bigger beyond palace gardens, beyond local disputes. You're thinking about systems. You're building an empire, not just babysitting one. So you do what any sensible ruler surrounded by absurd amounts of wealth does. You audit your resources. It sounds boring, sure, but stick with it. This is where things start to hum. You have gold. Yes, mountains of it, practically pouring out of your treasury like some kind of shiny cereal. But gold isn't everything. In West Africa, the real MVP of trade is salt. Weird, right? But salt preserves food, balances health, and tastes a lot better than sand. Salt is life. The mines at Tagaza are your salt jackpot. Imagine entire slabs being hacked out of the ground and hauled across the desert on camel caravans. Like big, flaky bricks of survival. You control those mines now. That means every trader crossing your domain either pays up or makes a very bad life decision. But running a Sultan gold empire isn't all riches and easy diplomacy. You need infrastructure. So you reinforce your roads well. Caravan trails. Really, these aren't Roman-style cobblestones. They're dusty paths lined with thorn bushes and the occasional lion. You post guards. You station messengers. You build way stations stocked with food, water, and horses. Like ancient rest stops minus the vending machines. And now, you start making friends the strategic kind. You send envoys to Morocco, Egypt, even to smaller kingdoms nearby like the Masi or the Jalaf. Your goal, get them talking about you, not fighting with you. Diplomacy is your low-key superpower. Even when you're clearly the richest guy in the room, you still act like everyone's opinion matters. That's terrifying, in its own way, but you're also practical. You begin setting up a tax system, not the annoying kind that funds a king's golden bathtub, but a smart system that keeps the roads safe and the scholars fed. Merchants pay tariffs in gold dust, cloth, or livestock. Local chiefs pledge loyalty through tribute, and you, the Mansa, redistribute that wealth like a benevolent landlord with an endless vault. Here's a fun and mildly unsettling fact. Your wealth grows so vast that even your horses wear gold-threaded saddles. Your guards, dressed like runway models in armor. Your court, a shimmering blur of fabrics from Persia, silks from Egypt, and leather dyed with rare tree bark. Even your cooks have bling. Historians estimate you had tens of thousands of servants and slaves, all fed, clothed, and managed by a sprawling bureaucracy you built with almost eerie calm. Now for the quirky tidbit. At one point, your court reportedly had a royal chewing gum master. Not the spearmint kind, we're talking traditional African chewing sticks, dipped in aromatic herbs to freshen the breath before official meetings. You had a guy whose entire job was pre-chewing wood for diplomatic freshness. Royal hygiene was serious business. You also formalize a court hierarchy. Every advisor knows their place. Griots compose flattering poetry on demand. Musicians strum ancient stringed instruments to fill awkward silences. And judges trained in Islamic law interpret disputes from across your provinces. You even create something like an HR department, except instead of filing complaints, they're solving inherited squabbles with swords politely sheathed. But not everything is internal. You're starting to eye that glittering prize of rulers everywhere, immortality. Not the magical kind, unfortunately, the historical kind. You want Mali to outlive you, to shine on scrolls and maps, to matter, and that's when you start thinking seriously about Timbuktu. At this point, it's just a trading post on the edge of the desert, useful, but not yet legendary. You decide to change that. You pour resources into it, encourage scholars to settle there, and send your architects to start shaping the skyline. Slowly, a sleepy mud brick town begins to hum with scholarly debate, religious discourse, and the quiet scratching of quills on parchment. Spoiler alert, in a few decades, Timbuktu becomes one of the world's greatest learning centers. Historians still argue whether you personally visited Timbuktu early in your reign or only funded it. From afar, either way, your fingerprints are all over it. You're not just a gold baron, you're an intellectual patron. A sort of medieval African Medici with better climate. Your people begin to notice and respect you. Oh, they revere you. You're not just the Mansa, you're the bringer of balance, the unifier of faith and tradition. Farmers toast your name over calabashes of millet beer. Children sing rhymes about your generosity. Griots compose epics where you fight lions made of silver and reason with spirits beneath the river. And yet, despite all this calm control, you're still building toward something massive, something that will shatter every record, flood entire economies, and launch your name into global history. But that comes later. For now, the land stretches beneath your feet like an open palm, ready to hold whatever you choose to place upon it. Your camels groan beneath their loads, the couriers run from village to village, the marketplaces buzz with news of distant lands, and you, quiet, deliberate, golden, you are just getting started. Your sandals kick up fine ochre dust as you walk the edge of the Niger River. Its waters thick and slow, almost meditative. The land around you is green here, richer, wetter than the dry northern plains, and you pause to watch fishermen sling their nets like muscle-bound dancers in a carefully choreographed ballet. But your mind isn't on fish, it's on books and teachers, and ink-stained fingers scribbling into the night. Because it's time to transform this empire not just into a rich one, but into a wise one. And where does wisdom live? In schools, in libraries, in cities where ideas swirl louder than markets. You've had your eye on Timbuktu, sure, but there's another jewel in your sights now. Gao, smaller, older, humbler, but poised to explode into something grand if given the right nudge. So, you send for scholars from Egypt, from Morocco, from Andalusia. You offer them stipends, housing, and more respect than most kings give their own blood relatives. And they come slowly at first, then in caravans. You greet them personally, a golden-robed emperor stooping to kiss the hands of a blind jurist or quoting Quranic verse to a startled grammarian. You're making a point. Learning is royal business now. You also commission new mosques grander, more permanent than the simple mud structures your people have used for generations. And here enters one of your most fascinating side quests. You become an early patron of Sudano-Sahelian architectural style using sun-baked bricks, wooden support beams, and these odd but beautiful towers that look like sandcastles built by gods with geometry degrees. One such masterpiece, the Jingober Mosque in Timbuktu. You'll build that later, after a certain very long trip, but even now, your architects begin experimenting. They mix Islamic motifs with local tradition, blending the sweeping arches of North African mosques with the warm, earthen aesthetics of West African design. It's not just construction, it's a philosophy made visible. And here's a quirky French tidbit for your travel journal. Some teachers at your early schools insist students memorize entire books of Islamic jurisprudence by singing them. It's like turning law school into a musical. The rhythm, they say, helps lock the wisdom into your bones. Bonus points if you can do it while herding goats still. You face resistance. Some traditionalists don't want Arabic taught to their children. Others fear outside scholars will bring arrogance or worse, change. But you don't silence them. You invite them to debate, in public, loudly, with snacks. It's all very Socratic. If Socrates had traded his robes for zebra print kaftans. Meanwhile, your scribes copy books on theology, astronomy, medicine, math. You build libraries, yes, plural, tiny candlelit sanctuaries tucked behind mosque walls and palace courtyards. Books become your second currency, traded between cities, gifted to noble families, sometimes buried with scholars who insist their favorite text should follow them into the next world. Your own education sharpens. 2. You read widely, debate with clerics, sit through lectures with the patience of a monk. And when visiting rulers arrive, you don't flaunt gold or armies, you flaunt your intellect. You quote the Quran, reference Aristotle, throw in a joke about camel digestion for good measure. This earns you something rarer than fear, respect. But not everyone is buying into the golden scholar king persona. Some rivals whisper that you're too obsessed with foreign ideas, that you're letting Arab influence drown out man tradition. Historians still argue whether your Islamic devotion ever clashed with indigenous customs, or if you manage a near magical harmony between them. Either way, you walk a tightrope every day, and yet, slowly, the narrative begins to shift. Mali is no longer just a land of glittering trade. It's a kingdom of ideas. Young nobles brag not just about their wealth, but their book collections. Towns compete to host the next traveling jurist. A peasant who can quote Hades may earn more respect than a warrior who owns 20 spears. You ride out occasionally, in disguise, to see these transformations for yourself. A village child recites a surah to you without realizing who you are. A marketplace elder quotes your tax policy verbatim. You smile, but say nothing. Knowledge, it seems, is spreading like desert fire, and behind it all, you, the emperor who made learning a national obsession, who planted a seed so deep that, centuries later, people would still speak of Mali with a hush, imagining it not as a savage land, but as a luminous, literate civilization. And here's something you might appreciate. All this knowledge building, it's part of your next big plan, the one that's going to shock the known world, ripple through economies, and make your name legendary. You've been building your mind and now you're preparing to build your image. But for now, the sun dips low, the griots and Niani sing you to sleep with verses about stars and scholars, and the empire, newly alive with ink and prayer, whispers quietly beneath the moonlight. You stretch before dawn, rising with the slow, golden crack of light over Niani's clay rooftops. But this morning, there's something different in the air, a hush, a tremble of anticipation. Because today, you're leaving, not forever, but far enough that it feels like stepping off the edge of the known world. Your destination, Mecca. Yes, that Mecca, the heart of Islam, the city you've prayed toward your entire life. It's time for the Hajj, the pilgrimage every Muslim must make at least once if able. You're able, all right. You're beyond able. In fact, you're about to perform the most legendary Hajj in human history, one that crashes economies, launches international gossip, and leaves you starring in European maps for centuries to come. Your entourage, modest. Just kidding. You bring over 60,000 people. Let that sink in. 60,000 people, like a stadium's worth of humans marching across the desert, plus hundreds of camels, thousands of servants, soldiers, griots, and scribes, and 80 to 100 camels loaded with gold, each carrying 300 pounds or more. It's not a caravan. It's a moving city. You wear silk so fine they shimmer like heat waves. Your horses are decked out in silver, your slaves in brocade, your personal guard in armor sharp enough to cut through gossip. It's less religious. Pilgrimage and more intercontinental flex, and you haven't even left West Africa yet. The journey itself, brutal. You cross the scorching Sahel, push through the sand-choked dunes of the Sahara, and dodge bandits with more ambition than skill. Your men build camp cities at night, complete with prayer tents, food courts, and music. You fund local mosques as you go, just because you can. You're like the Oprah of the 14th century. You get a mosque, but things truly go wild when you arrive in Cairo. Now, Cairo's no backwater. It's one of the richest, most sophisticated cities of the Islamic world. Scholars, traders, poets, and politicians all humming in one crowded hive. But when you show up, the whole system short-circuits. You meet with the Sultan of Egypt, and it's awkward at first. He expects a dusty tribal chief, not a bejeweled monarch whose camels literally sweat gold. When you decline to perform the traditional act of kneeling and kissing the ground before him, court gossip swells like a river after rain. But then you speak, in polished Arabic, quoting Hades, reciting theology like you wrote it yourself, and suddenly respect. The Sultan listens, smiles, offers you gifts. You accept, but not before giving him far more in return. And this is where things get ridiculous. Because you don't just donate a few coins. You flood Cairo with gold, buy food, souvenirs, homes, horses. You're tipping like a drunk lottery winner on payday. You give so generously that you unintentionally trigger a local economic crisis. No joke, the value of gold in Egypt plummets and doesn't recover for over a decade. Your Hajj becomes legend. Here's the quirky footnote. One story claims you gave so much gold to a local poet that the man retired, built a private library, and spent the rest of his life writing verses. To your generosity, historians still argue whether he actually existed or if he's just another glittering myth you left behind. You travel on, eventually reaching Mecca, the holy city. You circle the Kaaba. You pray among thousands. You listen, reflect, and for once, Keep a low profile. No gold tossing here, this part is sacred, solemn. The journey has exhausted you, but in the stillness of the prayer halls, you feel something shift. Not just spiritual cleansing, but a clarity of purpose. You realize Mali isn't just a kingdom. It's a message, and you're going to send that message across continents. On your return, you make pit stops in more cities: Medina, Jerusalem, Cairo again, and Tunis. But this time, you're not just sightseeing. You're recruiting scholars, architects, artists. You offer them coin, shelter, freedom. You're building an elite team to transform Mali's skyline, its schools, its storied out by now. Word of your journey has spread everywhere, in Venice, Genoa, even the courts of Castile. Nobles whisper about a black king so rich he could bankrupt a city by accident. Cartographers draw you into the Catalan Atlas, placing you in the center of Africa with a gold nugget the size of your head. Even if they don't know your real name, they know your weight. And while you're not the first African Muslim to complete the Hajj, you're definitely the most dramatic. This pilgrimage isn't just an act of devotion. It's a global announcement. Mali is powerful. Mali is civilized. Mali is here. You finally return home dusty, tired, and with probably more camels than you started with. But behind you trails a legacy already spiraling out of your control. You've turned a spiritual duty into one of the boldest acts of international diplomacy in medieval history. And deep inside, you've just begun shaping Mali's golden age. You step down from your camel at the edge of Niani, and the crowd goes quiet. Not because they don't recognize you, but because they almost don't believe you. After all, who returns from Mecca with thousands more people than they left with? Foreign scholars in flowing robes, architects from Andalusia, books, instruments, blueprints. Oh, and those camels? They're still groaning under the leftover gold you somehow didn't manage to give away. You're not just coming home, you're bringing the world back with you. But your gold-glittered journey has done more than inspire awe. It's triggered jealousy, too. Sultanates, kingdoms, caliphates. Suddenly they're all whispering, who does this guy think he is? One gold-laden pilgrimage, and now your name is echoing across continents. In Cairo, they're still dealing with the aftermath. Egyptian merchants are grumbling as the value of their diners limps back to normal. Historians still argue whether the economic fallout was overblown or a real meltdown. But one thing's certain, nobody forgets Mansa Musa. You, meanwhile, barely break stride. You unpack your caravan, settle your advisors, and immediately get to work reshaping Mali into the grand empire you envision somewhere between the dunes of the Sahara and the minarets of Mecca. First up, construction. You summon that quiet architect. From Andalusia, the one who barely speaks, but always seems to be sketching in the dust with his toe. His name is Al-Sahili, and though you'll never know if half the legends about him are true, he builds you some of the most iconic structures in African history. You give him his first major task, a new mosque in Timbuktu, the Gingerbread Mosque. It's made from mud brick and palm wood, yes, but it's also something more. With wooden beams poking out like ribs, carefully sculpted buttresses, and massive earthen towers, it becomes a symbol of fusion, your empire's Islamic faith woven together with its deep indigenous roots. You commission more mosques, libraries, courts. You even begin building a formal palace in Niani that could hold half your court and still leave room for a camel valet area. Cities that were once sleepy market towns now hum with builders, scholars, merchants, and ambitious teenagers practicing their Quranic recitations a little louder than necessary. And the gold, still flowing. But this time, you're investing it, not just throwing it around like confetti. You pay scholars stipends. You hire clerics to settle legal disputes. You import paper by the wagon load. Mali becomes the kind of place where knowledge is currency and books are bartered like fine silk. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Some of your nobles start muttering behind lattice screens. He's changing too much. He's favoring foreigners. What happened to good old man tradition? And yes, your preference for Arabic script, your ties to Islamic scholars from abroad, your Persian-style court etiquette rubs some locals the wrong way. But you're not suppressing their traditions. You're weaving them in. You sponsor guides to sing of your journey, to blend Islamic stories with ancient man epics. You fund ceremonies where elders perform rituals alongside imams, blending the spiritual worlds into one resonant drumbeat. And remember all those foreign visitors. You don't just plop them in a palace and feed them sweet cakes. You assign them. One becomes a teacher in Gao, Another is sent to Wallata to copy books. Al-Sahili becomes your personal urban planner. You're running Mali like a startup that just closed a $1 billion seed round. Meanwhile, your image continues to snowball abroad in Spain. Nobles hear tales of an African king whose court gleams with gold and wisdom. In Italy, maps are redrawn, placing you Mansa Musa at the literal center of Africa, golden nugget in hand. Smile like a guy who knows where all the treasure is buried. Here's a wild fringe tale. One rumor says you were so rich you once had a pond filled with liquid gold, just for the aesthetic. There's zero proof, obviously, but imagine it. Ducks paddling through molten metal. Your servants skimming coins off the surface with ladles. Totally impractical. Also, kind of fabulous. As Mali expands its influence through trade and learning, diplomacy becomes your next focus. You send ambassadors north, south, east, west, each bearing not just gold, but reputation. Letters in gold ink, gifts wrapped in embroidered silk. Your envoys are walking PR campaigns. You even open correspondence with rulers you've never met. Sultans, caliphs, distant kings. Your letters are elegant, devout, and dripping with subtle flexes. May peace be upon you. And by the way, our scholars just translated a 1,000-page astronomy text. Thought you'd enjoy the footnotes, and if there's ever a moment when someone questions your wealth, your reach, your legitimacy, you point to the cities now glowing in the desert night, the minarets lit by lanterns, the book caravans heading to Timbuktu, the children reciting verses beside elders quoting folk legends. That's your proof. You didn't just go to Mecca, you brought it back with you. Still, even golden reigns have shadows. Whispers reach your court, of rival empires stirring, of smaller kingdoms tired of being tributaries, of new alliances forming quietly like clouds, gathering before a sandstorm. But you don't panic. You smile. You write another letter, fund another school, carve another verse into the stone of your city's memory, because you know something no one else quite realizes yet. This isn't just Mali's golden age dot, it's the blueprint for something eternal. You lean against a carved cedar post, the cool evening breeze wafting through the courtyard of your palace in Niani. The sounds of your city pulse around you, laughter from a nearby courtyard, the clink of goblets, a griot tuning his ngoni beneath. A lantern's flicker, but your mind is far beyond these walls. You're seeing cities still unbuilt, markets still undrawn, futures still unwritten. The empire you returned has changed. You have changed it. Mali is no longer a rumor whispered on camel trails. It's a beaming center of wealth, faith, learning, and architecture. And you're not just its ruler now. You're its sculptor. And your next phase? Think urban planning meets celestial ambition. First on the docket, expanding Timbuktu. The Jingaber Mosque is finished now, and scholars flock to it like bees to baobab flowers. You begin funding madrasas Islamic schools so aggressively that books become more common than swords in some households. Traders no longer just bring gold or spices, they bring texts, paper, inks, scrolls. Knowledge is your new luxury item. You build Sankor University, or at least you bankroll its rise from a simple mosque school into one of the most prestigious centers of learning in the world. Students travel from Cairo, from Fez, even from as far as Yemen to sit cross-legged on woven mats, copying texts and debating theology under the watchful eyes of stern, brilliant teachers. Timbuktu becomes a world capital of scholarship. At its peak, the city boasts tens of thousands of manuscripts covering not only Islam, but law, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and the occasional treatise on whether cats are spiritual animals. Historians still argue whether you personally believed in cat wisdom, or just liked how they cleared out the palace mice. Meanwhile, you're not neglecting Gao and Wallata, you elevate them, too. Each city gets funding from mosques, schools, and libraries, and you push your architects to try new things: taller towers, wider prayer halls, more elaborate patterns made with local clay. The Sudano-Sahelian style evolves under your watch into something even more sophisticated. Your buildings aren't just places of worship or study their statements. You also start something that would make most medieval rulers faint: standardizing weights and measures. Because nothing ruins a good economy like everyone measuring grain with different sized baskets. You introduce uniform units for trade, especially for gold and salt. Merchants praise you. Tax collectors worship you. And speaking of taxes, you refine your systems again. Not to wring people dry, but to make sure everyone from the fisherman on the riverbank to the merchant in the camel convoy knows what they owe and why. You even issue something like a currency reform less reliance on raw gold dust, more on standardized nuggets or stamped trade goods. Mali's economy doesn't just grow, it stabilizes. But even as your cities rise, you're dealing with new challenges. Success draws attention and sometimes envy. Smaller kingdoms like the Mossi Confederacy begin resisting your influence more openly. Some trade partners try to cut shady deals with rival rulers. Your advisors urge you to launch military campaigns. To squash resistance before it spreads, you pause. You're not against using force, you've done it when needed. But your preferred weapon is still strategy. So, instead of open war, you launch a charm offensive. You send scholars, not swords. You invite rival rulers to visit your cities, see the prosperity, the peace, and if they don't come, you make sure their envoys return home with gifts so lavish, so overwhelming, that resistance starts to feel unprofitable. Here's a fun, possibly apocryphal tale. Legend has it you once sent a rival chief a robe so heavy with gold embroidery it required 2 men to carry it. Not to wear it, just to carry it. No threats needed. Just a fashion statement that said, you could be part of this glow, too. And what about the people? Your citizens. They thrive. Farmers benefit from improved irrigation and safer roads. Market vendors sell goods from 3 continents. Students graduate into roles as scribes, judges, or teachers. Women, especially in urban centers, begin to hold more visible roles as traders, spiritual leaders, and even scholars. Historians still argue whether your court had official female advisors or if their influence remained behind the scenes. But there's no doubt women in Mali held far more autonomy than in many surrounding societies. You walk through these cities often quietly, in disguise. You stop to listen to debates in the madrasas, inspect the markets, tip the musicians, and everywhere you go, you hear stories of how you brought Mecca home, how you turned sand into schools, how Mali became a light in the desert, and how you lit the first torch. Your guides, of course, eat this up. They turn your achievements into epic poems, half history, half magic. They chant of how your words shaped rivers, how your gold blinded kings, how even the stars above your palace lean closer to listen. Okay, maybe a little exaggerated, but you don't correct them. Why spoil the rhythm? By now, you've governed for decades. Your beard, if you have one, is silver-streaked. Your steps slower, but your eyes sharper. You've seen Mali rise from strong to sublime. And while you never build statues, Islamic art avoids images. You've built something better, a living, breathing legacy, cities, books, systems, faith. But you're not done yet. You have one last chapter to write. And like all good stories, it begins with a question. What happens after you? You sit beneath a slanted sunshade in your neon courtyard, sipping sweetened tamarind water, the air thick with the scent of earth and incense. There are more lines on your face now, more silence in your days. But in that silence, your empire hums like a giant living engine, and you're still at the helm, just a little more from the shadows these days. Mali is booming. Your gold and salt routes are running smoother than ever, guarded by elite horsemen trained in ambush tactics and strict discipline. Your coastal traders whisper about new connections to people who look like pale ghosts and ride strange wooden houses across the sea. Yes, the Europeans are stirring. Portugal's shadow is creeping up the Atlantic coast, but you're already aware. You've heard the sailors' stories. You've mapped your coastlines with more detail than they could dream of. At home, things sparkle. Literally, Mali's cities are now international destinations, drawing poets from Morocco, scientists from Cairo, and even wandering mystics who claim to speak with birds. You let one of them stay at court for a week. He talked to a peacock. The peacock did not reply. Timbuktu has officially become a university town, its students crowding into courtyards, reciting complex legal texts, solving math problems with pebbles, and arguing over celestial physics while roasting yams on shared fires. You've even ordered cataloging projects, massive attempts to organize your growing libraries. Some texts are in Arabic, others in Songhai or Man. Some are so old they crumble when touched, others fresh from scribes' reed pens. You walk past these manuscripts, hand on your chin, wondering how many generations will read them after you're gone. Your wealth, beyond imagination, you're not even counting the nuggets anymore. You measure influence in regions, in allegiances, in the sheer number of markets where your coin is accepted like a promise. So yes, these are the boom years of Mali. But here's the real flex. You've figured out how to balance it all. Religion, trade, scholarship, Diplomacy, it no longer feels like juggling spears while riding a giraffe. It's become instinct. When disputes arise between Muslim jurists and animist priests, you form a council that listens to both, even if they can't agree on which invisible force created the river gods. When border provinces start feeling a little too independent, you don't send in troops first. You send in brides, royal marriages tying distant clans into the Musa bloodline. Politics is now part matchmaking show, part chess tournament, and your court, a cosmopolitan circus of languages, cultures, and brilliant chaos. You host ambassadors from across North Africa, and when they try to outdo you with embroidered robes or clever proverbs, you smile and casually mention that your zebra stable has just been expanded. Yes, that's right. You've got a zebra stable now, just because you can. You also hear something curious from the East, rumors about the Yuan dynasty crumbling, the Mongol Empire fracturing, and trade routes shifting. It gets you thinking, should Mali send envoys further, beyond Cairo, maybe even toward India or China? Historians still argue whether you ever made plans to establish direct relations with Asian empires. Some claim documents were lost. Others say your ambitions didn't reach quite that far, but if anyone could have done it, it was you. Still, for all this glory, you're no fool. You know time is circling you like a cautious vulture, so you start grooming your successor. You have sons, possibly dozens, but one in particular, you see something in him: intelligence, patience, not as flashy as you, perhaps, but thoughtful, steady. You begin bringing him into your councils, letting him speak at court. You watch the way he handles disagreement, how he treats servants, how he studies law. You're not looking for a clone. You're looking for someone who will continue the story without ruining the ending. You also begin reviewing your legal system. You clarify land rights. You reinforce protections for merchants and scholars. You establish procedures for inheritance, crime, and even international grievances. The Kadishur Islamic judges grow in number and prestige. Their rulings, once limited to religious disputes, now shape the daily lives of farmers, traders, and aristocrats alike. But there's something bittersweet growing inside you, a kind of nostalgia in reverse. You see the roads full of life, the caravans full of goods, and you remember a younger version of yourself walking beside donkeys, listening to griots, wondering if anyone would ever say your name outside your village. Now, your name rides the winds across 3 continents. Oh, and the quirky tidbit of this chapter? It said you once ordered an artificial lake built near your palace, not for irrigation, not for fish, just for peace. You'd sit by it in the early mornings, sipping from a ceramic bowl, watching the herons pick their way along the shore. You called it your mirror of the world. Whether that's true or not, who knows, but the image is poetic enough that griots made sure it's stuck out by now. Young scholars are writing essays about your reforms. Foreign traders are copying your market layouts. Maps are being redrawn. Cultures you've never visited are adjusting their compasses to point toward Mali, and you know the tide will shift. It always does, but not yet. Tonight, the air smells like honey and smoke. A flute plays softly from somewhere in the guest wing. Your son stands near you, listening as your advisors debate land grants. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to listen, to let it sink in. This is the sound of an empire at its height. The air feels heavier now, not ominous, just full, like the pause before a long exhale. You still rise early, your back a little stiffer, your steps more deliberate. But the empire marches on, faster than ever. Mali is a machine now, smooth and elegant, grinding gold and thought into legend. But you, Mansa Musa, are starting to sense the story shifting. You've ruled for decades. You've reshaped the continent's imagination. But now, behind the layers of silk and ceremony, there's a quiet question trailing you like a shadow. What happens when you're gone? It's a question no amount of gold can answer. Your son Magan has been shadowing you for years now. He speaks with grace. He mediates well. But you wonder if he has the fire, the vision, the willingness to sleep in the dust with scholars and rise at dawn to chart caravan schedules by starlight. He's ready, maybe, but the empire you've built isn't simple anymore. It's a delicate ecosystem of trade, faith, and diplomacy balanced on the spine of 1,000 interlocking relationships. One false move and things can spiral fast. And yes, the signs are already there. In the east, Songhai is stirring again. That quiet kingdom you once kept under soft control is growing bold. Gao is prospering, and its leaders are watching. Mali's wealth with the same hunger you once had for Ghana. You can't blame them, but you can't ignore them either. Meanwhile, Mossy warriors from the forest belt are testing your southern border. They raid occasionally, slip in and out like shadows, daring you to respond. You could crush them, but you don't. You've never ruled by fear alone, and besides, you're tired of war. Even in your own cities, change is coming. Timbuktu's scholars are beginning to divide into schools of thought. Heated debates erupt over which texts hold true knowledge. Some accuse others of heresy. Others accuse you of not enforcing orthodoxy hard enough. Historians still argue whether this intellectual fragmentation began under your watch, or was simply the natural result of a blossoming knowledge culture. But the tension is real. You see it in the narrowed eyes of your caddies, in the way students argue louder than usual, in the occasional scribe who copies a banned manuscript and hides it under a floorboard. Because ideas, like gold, have a way of slipping through fingers, and still, the outside world watches. Europe is waking up from its slumber. The Black Death will soon sweep through its cities, though you won't live to see it. But already, travelers and merchants whisper about kingdoms beyond the sea, about ships that could cross oceans, not just hug coasts. You wonder if your long-lost predecessor, Abubakar II, ever reached those shores, if he stood on foreign sand, gold in hand, and told some stunned villager, "I'm from Mali." You'll never know, but that question, that mystery, might be your favorite part of ruling. The part where curiosity meets legacy. Now, your court is older too. The griots who sang you into legend as a young man now sing slower, with more tremble in their voices. Some still recite the pilgrimage epics of Cairo and Mecca, of collapsing markets and golden gifts. But others have begun composing new songs, less about you, more about your successors. The transition has begun, and here's a small, strange detail for you. As age settles in your joints and you begin spending more time in prayer, you become known for carrying a small stone in your robe, smooth, black, no inscription, just something to hold, to ground you. Scholars debate its meaning. Was it a religious relic, a gift from a mystic, a stone from the banks of the Niger, picked up as a child? You never say. And now the records start to blur. Modern historians can't agree on exactly when or even how you died. Some say it was in 1337, others argue for a later date, citing letters, ledgers, and a court decree that sounds very Musa-esque. The only consensus? That you passed the throne to your son and quietly withdrew. Some stories claim your final days were spent near your beloved lake, watching birds cut across the dawn sky. Others say you died during prayer, or that you vanished like Abubakar, leaving only footprints and riddles. What's certain is this: the empire noticed. When the news finally spread, it did not arrive with trumpets. It came with lowered voices, slow footsteps, hands held over hearts. In the palaces of Walata and Gao, students paused their recitations. In the markets of Tagaza, saw traders shared silent glances. Even the griots took a beat before striking their drums again. And Mali did not collapse. Not immediately. The system held. The roads remained guarded. The mosque still echoed with prayer. But the your glow dimmed just a little. Magan tried, truly, but succession is a tricky beast, and not all sons inherit both gold and grit. Over time, cracks widened. Sondai rose. Timbuktu changed hands. Internal disputes began to flare. The golden age, once blazing like a sun across West Africa, softened into a memory. But that's how empires go. What matters is that yours was built on more than wealth. It was built on intention, on books and bridges, mosques and manners, on the belief that Africa could be the center of the world, not its margin. And in many ways, it was. Because centuries later, your name is still spoken, in textbooks, in songs, on maps drawn by hands that never touched African soil. Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live, the man who gave away so much gold he broke economies, the pilgrim, the builder, the king, and also the boy who once sat under a mango tree, listening to griots, dreaming of something bigger than his village. The night is warm and breathless. The stars above Neon are brilliant, dust-speckled tapestry. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, a drum echoes gently in the distance, slow and soft, like a heartbeat in the dark. The empire sleeps, and you're no longer here. Not in the literal sense. Your body, whatever tomb it rests in, is long returned to the earth. But your name hasn't stopped moving. It rides the winds across the soul. It echoes in madrasa halls and through the pages of fading Manuscripts. It's scratched into the margins of maps drawn by men who didn't even believe Africa had kings. Mansa Musa. They still say it with a blend of awe and confusion. Because how can someone so powerful, so lavish, so impossibly rich, have ruled centuries ago in a place most of the world never understood? And that's the thing, isn't it? You didn't just accumulate wealth, you challenged the narrative. You flipped the script, and now your legacy is more than gold or territory or buildings. It's scale. It's the audacity of vision. It's what you made possible after your passing. The Mali Empire does what empires always do. It changes, shifts, frays at the edges. Magan, your chosen heir, struggles to maintain your rhythm. He's not weak, exactly, just not you. He lacks your vision, your subtle touch, your sixth sense for politics, and unfortunately, a golden machine needs golden hands to keep it running. In time, Mali begins to bend beneath its own weight. The provinces once content to send tribute and praises grow restless. Songhai begins its rise, slowly siphoning away influence, traders and scholars. Timbuktu, once your shining jewel, becomes a contested prize, changing hands between powers like a sacred book passed through greedy fingers. Trade shifts to the Atlantic is calling. European ships begin to nose along the coast. New routes open, old ones fade. Mali's influence begins to shrink, not overnight, but like a drumbeat slowing in the distance. And yet, even as the borders contract and your name fades from court records, something else happens. Something quieter, something lasting. In villages, elders still pass on tales of your pilgrimage, the rivers of gold, the scholars in silk, the mosque in the desert that reach for the sky. Griots chant your name long after your lineage has vanished. Children play games pretending to be the Mansa, handing out invisible gold, arguing with imaginary sultans. Your story becomes myth, and myth becomes memory. In Europe, your face is drawn on the Catalan atlas, a golden nugget held in one hand, your gaze serene, your crown high. They don't know you, not really, but the image sticks. You become a symbol, the black king of wealth and wisdom, the figure who proved that Africa wasn't darkness, it was radiance. And in modern times, your name returns again. Historians dig, economists gape at your numbers. You're compared to tech billionaires, oil tycoons, pharaohs. But none of them did what you did, spread wealth and power with grace, with poetry, with architectural flair and economic precision. Here's the quirky postscript. There's a video game where you're a playable leader. You sit on your golden throne, watching over Mali with a slight smirk, as if even in pixelated form, you know you're better than the rest. Teenagers around the world select you not because you're flashy, but because they know you build empires, and you make them last. Historians still argue whether you were more politician or prophet, whether you were truly the richest man who ever lived or just the most generous, whether the stories are embellished, whether the pilgrimage really sank Cairo's economy or simply made a good song better. But that's the beauty of a legend. It doesn't require certainty, just memory. And memory, you got that in spades. You are remembered in the mud-brick minarets of Timbuktu, in the surviving manuscripts that scholars still painstakingly preserve today, in the way your story forces people to reimagine what Africa once was and what it still can be. Because long after the caravan stopped, the gold faded, and the scribes turned the final page, your empire remained a light in the dark, a fire built not on conquest or cruelty, but on scholarship, diplomacy, and scale. And as the final drumbeat fades, and the night drapes itself over Mali like a velvet cloth, your name lingers softly, powerfully, like wind over sand. Mansa Musa, the king who dreamed in gold and built in stone, the man who walked the desert and came back with a world, the boy under the mango tree, the Mansa, eternal. So now, take a breath. Let the dust of the Sahara settle in your imagination. Let the fires of the caravan fade to glowing embers. Feel the silence of the mosque at dusk, the soft murmur of a student reciting verses, the rustle of robes moving through palace halls under starlight. You've traveled far tonight, across deserts, through libraries, inside courtrooms, and deep into the layered memory of an empire that once shone like the sun itself. You've worn gold-threaded cloaks, tipped your crown to sultans, walked the streets of Cairo and Mecca, and returned with more than any man left with, not just riches, but ideas, vision, balance. Let that sense of vastness settle into your chest. The knowledge that one person, born without fanfare, can change the rhythm of an entire world, not by brute force, but by wisdom, generosity, and impossible ambition. Your eyes may be heavy now. That's okay. Let the names blur a little. Let the cities become flickers of candlelight in the distance. Let the story drift into the realm between waking and sleep, where gryas still sing and caravan bells still jingle, because tonight you carried an empire, and tomorrow, well, that's for another dream. Good night, Mansa, in a script. Sweet dreams.